then you probably want to use many of the same things. You want to use these kind of constructive algorithms, grammars, and agent-based methods and so on, because they're fast, they're reliable, you know what their limits are. But there are also other things you can use. For example, you can now take these methods and distill them into a diffusion model and make this diffusion model promptable. So if you just ask like a diffusion model coming out of, like if you ask ChatGPT, basically, make me a good level for this game, for a game it has never seen before, it's not going to be good, because it's not going to adhere to your level format. It's not going to be able to show that like one point is reachable from another, stuff like that. And you're going to have a problem describing mechanics and so on. But you can take, if you have an existing level generator, then you can generate lots of levels, use a large language model or VLM to basically label them, and then train a diffusion model to sort of generate more levels like that. And then you have a promptable steerable generator. So that's a new advance.
Welcome to ODSC's Ai X Podcast, your gateway to the latest in AI and data science. Whether you're an aspiring data scientist or a seasoned AI professional, we bring you insights from the best minds in the field, shaping the future of AI. This episode is sponsored by ODSC West, the premier AI Builders Conference, celebrating its 10th year this October 28th to 30th in San Francisco and virtually. Learn more at odsc.com/California and use the code PODCAST for an exclusive 10% discount. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of ODSC's Ai X Podcast. My name is Alex Landa, and I'm the head of content here at ODSC. Our guest today is Julian Togelius, an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at New York University, and the co-director of the NYU Game Innovation Lab. With that, Julian, welcome. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me here. Excited.
Great. So I said a little bit of your background, but why don't you tell me a bit more about yourself and your background, especially in regards to gaming and AI?
All right. I was born, maybe not that far. But yes, I grew up in southern Sweden, in the city of Malmö. And I went to high school and I graduated from high school, even though I almost failed math. And I hated math and I wanted nothing to do with math. And the last place I could imagine seeing myself in the future would be an engineering school, because engineers are boring people that do stuff with math. And and look at what that got me. So basically, I wanted to understand the mind. So I studied philosophy and psychology in university, and I realized that it's all moving too slowly for me. You know, I needed to do things that to understand. The mind. So I needed to build the mind. So I gradually segued into computer science to sort of to build the mind so I can understand them. And I went for a master's in England, another PhD in England. I did a postdoc in Switzerland under Jürgen Schnitthuber, who many of listeners will know about. And then I was working as faculty in Copenhagen, and then now here in New York, which is a great place in many ways. But basically, for a while, I thought that I was really into kind of nature-inspired methods, as it was called then, using evolutionary computation to train neural networks to do fancy stuff. And I wanted to work with robotics. But robots are super slow and they break down all the time. And, you know, they behave differently when you, when the battery is low, or like the tires are hot or stuff like this. And, you know, who wants to deal with it? So and back then, robot applications were really, really bad as well. So I figured that why not use video games? And 20 years ago, that was kind of a new thing. People weren't doing that. So I made a bit of a splash. We're doing evolving neural networks to play video games like racing games and like simple arcade games and stuff like this. And somewhere along the way, I figured that, okay, we can have AI methods that play the games. And that's fun and all. And it's a great way of developing new AI methods and testing them and stuff like this. And it looks good, and people sit up and take notice, like, "Oh, that's well." But then I realized that we can flip it around. Why not use AI to try to help you design the games? Why not have them make levels, characters, game rules, stories, stuff like that. And that's where things really kicked off. So I used to say that, these days I work on AI for games and games for AI in basically that order. But I'm really interested in both. I also do other things. I recently put out a second edition of our book on artificial intelligence in games. And I wrote a little book on artificial general intelligence, a very weird concept. And I also co-founded a company called modl.ai, so modl.ai, that tries to use AI to do quality assurance for games. And you know what? That's hard. Yeah, so I wear a bunch of hats. And anyway, then I've realized that, so I sort of moved into more practical stuff. And then I come here and I realize that David Chalmers is my actual neighbor. So, and he's a great guy. Awesome. I'm just not really doing philosophy anymore. Although sometimes I kind of am. Here's like, my little artificial general intelligence book. She's kind of philosophy. Maybe can't be stopped, but
It's I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows what AGI is.
No.
Concept, and until it's tangible, we're not really.
Well, it's about as well defined as the warp drives in Star Trek, or about as well defined as pornography. Except people don't know it when they see it. So
yeah, it's there's definitely tangential here, but I read something a while ago that so many of our great inventions came from sci-fi, because if someone thought of it in an abstract way, it gave us a goal. Less what is it, and more so, great, how do we get there?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like we're all very, very much inspired by sci-fi in different ways. It's like, Elon Musk has talked about how he's very deeply inspired by Ian M. Banks' Culture series of books, which is kind of funny because Ian M. Banks, the Culture series are great. They're very, very much worth reading and thinking about. But the kind of future utopia in those books is, you would say, you could call it communist or anarchy, which is kind of fascinating for the actual politics of the man in question, or not that. But now we're definitely on a tangent. We're talking about video game here, right?
Yes. We'll save sci-fi for maybe next time I'm in New York, I'll drop it in one of your classes.
Oh yeah, sounds good.
So on gaming, so you first wrote the artificial intelligence in games in 2018.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have believed that was a thing, because AI wasn't really a thing in 2018. It was an idea. Still, I mean, okay, it definitely was a thing, but not what we know as today's AI. Back then, recommendation engines, and
honestly, I don't want to be like old, but I am old. I'm 46. That's really old in this business. Old man yells at the cloud. The first AI in games, the first time AI was used for games was when Alan Turing himself, in 1946, I believe, reinvented the minimax algorithm and played chess against his friend, doing the calculations on paper because they haven't actually built a functioning computer yet, which is awesome. And then like the next really big thing was the original invention of reinforcement learning, Arthur Samuel, in 1952, I think, which basically he invented what is the first reinforcement learning algorithm in order to play checkers. He was working at IBM, but it took him like 4 or 5 years to get it published, because IBM didn't want to publish the paper because they were scared of being seen as working on artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence was scary and would replace all the workers. This was the 1950s. And for a long time when we talked about reinforcement learning, the kind of like when I studied it back in the early 2000s, and when I taught it in the first few times, the reference was Jerry Casauro's backgammon player, which we used reinforcement learning from 1992. So yeah, there's like, even in 2018, there was a lot of stuff basically to write about. So the first edition of this book was 350 pages, and we felt we were just scraping the surface.
All right, so I'm gonna put an asterisk on what I said earlier, then, that our modern idea of AI is from that, because like we can get into semantics and say, what was the first video game? What was the first AI? The first computer was mid 1800s.
Depending on, computer. Yeah.
First,
there's a lot of contenders for first computer, but most of the good ones were around the time of World War II, basically. What's interesting is that there was so much work on AI for board games. It's like chess was like, the thing that people used as like one of the main test beds for AI, and one of the main problems studied for like, since the field of AI started in the 1960s, and for the next like 50 years or so, chess was one of the big things. And then chess was we're kind of done with it. It's not solved yet, but it's like comfortably superhuman. But why do people play chess? And, there is this like theory that, imagine like the original people starting the field of AI in the 1960s. And they were looking around themselves, and you imagine a bunch of white men in suits, essentially, and imagine a black and white photograph of a bunch of white men in suits, essentially. And they were looking around the room like, okay, we should have something we can make the machines do. What do intelligent people do? Okay, we are intelligent people. What do we do? Well, we prove mathematical theorems and we play chess. So, but what started happening in the early 2000s, and then I was part of that kind of new movement, was actually using AI in video games. And that was like, we were a small community, and then back in 2015 with DeepMind's Atari paper, that it became a big thing, essentially.
Yeah, DeepMind, AlphaGo.
Well, AlphaGo, yeah, but also they had the networks playing Atari.
Atari, yep. With
okay.
I wrote an article on this a couple of years ago. Like OpenAI did Dota,
yeah,
right.
Right.
MOBA.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, there's clearly defined rules, very clear strategies to win. One of our speakers recently did something of trying to teach AI how to play Super Smash Brothers. Definitely a little more complicated than chess, but same effect. Very clearly defined rules.
But here's the funny thing, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Is it more complicated? Is it less complicated? Or is it differently complicated? Because one of the beautiful things that video games and games in general tell you is that they're all so different. And one of the things I love to hate is the viewer's intelligence as like, a single dimension. You're less intelligent, you get more intelligent, and you just like this number goes up, And I feel like it's like way more way more multidimensional than that. And the beautiful thing about games is that games are so different. Like Super Smash Bros. And chess are hard in such different ways that you just have to solve completely different problems. Like one is not about perceptual processing of a complicated picture, real-time movement, accurate estimation of timing, stuff like this. And the other one is about long-term planning in a very constrained space, and sort of adversarial. Both of them have adversarial models, but different kinds of adversarial models that you need to move. And the also beautiful thing is that there is no model that can do both. And definitely not. You couldn't even connect one model that could do Smash Bros to chess and vice versa.
Right. Well, I mean, like Super Smash has the different variable context for certain things, the location within a map, how much percentage damage the opponent already has, the actual weight and variable of the move itself. Is it a heavy thing? Is it like Bowser's fire move, which is trickle damage? Chess doesn't have that. Chess doesn't have, you moved your horse 5 times, now it can double its move length, anything like that. It's very...
maybe we should have, Bowser's fire move in chess that self is maybe
chess more dynamic.
Right. 4-player mode. Yeah. That's on. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, all these things about different levels of gaming and depth. What AI in gaming was in 2018 when he first wrote your book is definitely different from what it is today. A lot of the same principles are there, I'm sure. But 7 years is quite a long time. So what has remained the same that might be surprising, and what's different enough that caused you to write a second edition of the book?
Right. Yeah. So the second edition of the book, and the first edition was 350 pages and we were exhausted. The second edition is 530 pages. We're really exhausted this time. So everybody will talk about the generative AI revolution. Let's start with a couple of things that are really the same. If you want to come up with if you want to build a good chess player or a good Go player, things have not changed in the last 7 years. Same principles are there. And you're not going to use any of there's no diffusion models, there's no large language models and so on in this. In fact, large language models are terrible at chess. Sometimes they'll do really clever stuff. Sometimes they'll just invent illegal moves that don't exist and stuff like this. And so what you want to use is basically search algorithms augmented with deep learning that help you evaluate positions and suggest which kind of paths in the search tree to explore deeper. And that's been the case since AlphaGo, essentially. Now, for other things, if you want to, for example, generate levels for your 2D games, a lot of the same methods are still valid, and often what you want to use. For example, say you want to build a new roguelike game, you want to build the next Diablo or Hades or something, Pixel Dungeons, then you probably want to use many of the same things. You want to use these kind of constructive algorithms, grammars, and agent-based methods and so on, because they're fast, they're reliable, you know what their limits are. But there are also other things you can use. So, for example, you can now take these methods and distill them into a diffusion model and make this diffusion model promptable. So if you just ask a diffusion model coming out of if you ask ChatGPT, basically, make me a good level for this game, for a game it has never seen before, it's not going to be good, because it's not going to adhere to your level format. It's not going to be able to show that one point is reachable from another, stuff like that. And the thing is, and you're going to have problem describing mechanics and so on. But you can if you have an existing level generator, then you can generate lots of levels, use a large language model or VLM to basically label them, and then train a diffusion model to sort of generate more levels like that. And then you have a promptable steerable generator. So that's a new advance. That the paper AAAI last year about this, and we were quite happy about this. Also, if you want to model human players, because that's a big field in AI for games. In fact, one of these areas where almost all the game developers actually use modern AI methods, or somewhat modern AI methods, is in analyzing the player data, because you want to figure out how to make more money, and maybe make the game better. So that used to be the kind of analysis we could do 7 years ago. Were more limited, and now you can actually do analysis of visual output and with some accuracy look at and predict player experience from that. Not great accuracy, and you probably need to sort of augment it with other variables from games and so on. And then you have completely new things that have emerged. For example, which is a very interesting topic, steerable, promptable video models, which is also called neural game engines, where you basically, in a sense, use a diffusion model or a diffusion transformer as a game engine. You basically prompt it for like in a scenario, and then you can play that scenario. Google's Genie 3 that came out recently is not publicly available. It's a very cool example of this. And there's a lot of interesting ideas about what could you do with this? What could this be essentially? What kind of function with the game development process is accomplishing? Yeah, so these are some interesting differences, but there are many more.
So, are you already planning version 3? Has version 2 already become obsolete with all these new models and games?
And I'm going to give you the professor answer, which is like the principles are never obsolete. But yeah, exactly. This is my professor hat on. At some point, there will be a third edition. It's just so much work. We need some rest now.
That is definitely fair. Marketing principles from 10 years ago, 20 years ago haven't changed too much, but now we just have ChatGPT to help us with all of that.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to touch on creativity for gaming is an incredibly creative field. It's multimodal. We have graphics, writing, usually all the above at once. Like recently, I played the game Expedition 33. Have you heard of that?
About it, but I haven't played it. Yeah, it would be fun.
Easily one of my favorite games of all time, instantly. And I bring that one up because it truly showed how creative humans can be. It was all about, takes place in alternate Paris, very creative, how it blends its history of art and culture into one. Amazing music, graphics are fantastic, truly game of the year, maybe game of the decade.
Wow.
And it shows to me how creative it can be, but AI isn't that creative yet. So how do you implement AI into game development with rupturing the creative magic that humans bring to the table?
It's an interesting one. First of all, I've been working on computational creativity for a long time, and recently I've had a kind of mindset. I want AI to be creative. I would rather. Well, I'd like it to be creative in a sense that it complements humans. I'm as interested in the open-ended learning loops and so on, where you basically you have the models, so like the algorithms setting their own goals and learning to sort of fulfill them in different ways and doing things that are kind of weird and out there, because that can give us new ideas and inspiration, and that we can then build into something. And the other thing is like, for example, Genie 3, this neural game engine or promptable video generation model, one of the most interesting uses of that was when I basically gave it some really strange prompts like Tetris, hashtag photorealistic, hashtag real life. And super strange kind of playable scenarios that look nothing like Tetris and look nothing like a reasonable game, but they're just like, it's just like evocative and makes you want to design something inspired by it. So I think there's definitely a role in for AI ideation, AI giving you new creative input and so on. But then at the other end, there's a role for like AI as a tool for doing a lot of drudge work. Like, hey, write me all the boilerplate code. And like, here is one of these houses. Make me 100 more of these houses, or stuff like. So you can sort of paint with a broad brush strokes and have the details taken care of for you. So this is like a really this is really interesting, because like people are of course very if you go to the game industry now, you'll find that it's in a state of almost like a culture war, where you see people who are really, really gung-ho about AI, we should use it everywhere. And then you see people who are really, really worried that basically their livelihoods are being taken away and their data is being stolen. And I find myself passionately sympathizing with both sides here. There is a real issue with like styles being copied, and stuff like this. At the same time, the answer is not like some kind of draconic sort of, limitations on like, you can't train on this, because that would basically get us into, that would basically limit the freedom to do a lot of things. We'd have like a crazy control over what we can do with the internet. So I don't know. I don't have an answer here. There is a real tension. I think more than anything, we need like to culturally decide what we think is important. I mean, politics, they say, is downstream from culture. And I think basically thinking and coming to a culturality that, yes, it's great to use AI tools. They can do a lot of cool stuff for it, but we only use them as tools. And it should be considered something kind of like trying to sort of automate the creativity or take the creativity away, should be seen as something like really embarrassing and something like, you don't want to be seen doing. Is terribly gauche and sort of disgusting, like, these poor people. So, we and also this thing, like, we should not use them to sort of, to get people fired. We should use them to sort of make us more able to focus on the real creative tasks and doing less drudge work. I've seen interesting attempts, because a lot of large and small studios are really wrestling with this. I saw a talk from Rovio, for example, Angry Birds Rovio, where they were talking about how they were training their own models internally and their own data. And most of their artists seem to be quite happy with actually using this to basically produce more content, but in their own style. And some of the content was very much made for hand. Some of the content, like backdrops, they basically made using models as a tool. So I think that is probably the way we should try going, but I don't know.
I mean, it's too new to really have any strong answer just yet, because there are people who are reluctant to use AI who will say, you know what, maybe I can use it for this, or the people who are so hype about it that say it's new, it's shiny, we need to get ahead of it, and then eventually say, you know what I miss? Drawing with pen and paper.
Yeah, no, not. In a sense, I mean, experimentation is good. And another aspect of this is like current models have a very strong kind of in-distribution bias, basically a strong normie bias. I like to think of like large language models as like wearing chinos and a button-down shirt bought at Gap. The most kind of normal thing you can imagine. It's like giving answers that are extremely kind of typical. And then sometimes, and they can shock you with their extreme erudition, because, hey, this kind of extreme normie has read every book in existence and looked at every picture in existence and whatever, but there's still like very much a bias towards these things. And your job, one of the most productive things you can do is to play with these models and allow yourself to be a bit provoked and outraged and do more out there things that you wouldn't do otherwise. Like, haha, we're going to do art you would never do for that sake,
Right.
Yeah.
A little pushback here. Nope, still need here.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to go out to prove it by being weird. And that's something we need. We need, like, because one thing is like, do we need more games? Do we need more books? Do we need more images? Like stuff like this. But people can wonder that, and they've been wondering about that for like literally hundreds of years. Like, people have been complaining since Gutenberg, like, too many people write books, and, probably people have been complaining for at least 20, 30 years or more that too many people make games. And, it's so easy these days and getting easier. So even more people are going to make games, and that's great. But the way to stand out is to really go out of distribution, do something that do something that these models would never do.
I mean, that definitely makes a lot of sense, which is fantastic because it forces a lot of people to really push themselves to get extra creative. Like we can't do generic anymore.
No.
There are certain people that like generic. Like I used to take a lot of influence by Palahniuk and Vonnegut. And you kind of realize like, and you could probably prompt ChatGPT to say, write a story with this premise based on these two authors. How does it turn out? And now it's like, all right, got to get.
Yeah. But it's still gonna be a very kind of oddly smooth version of Vonnegut. Like, it's bizarre, right? Because like, then you get like Vonnegut feel in some sense, but clearly way too polished, right? It's interesting. So you compared to if you do it yourself.
Right. Because that's definitely been something I've noticed with AI is a lot of the time it's too clean and lacks a lot of the roughness that humans have.
Yeah.
Like there definitely are times in even my favorite books or favorite games where I'm like, this is kind of janky. This is weird. Why did you do this? But I appreciate it because a human made that decision, using AI in this way.
This is really interesting. So, obviously AI can be used in many parts of the process. Typically, large studios don't talk about it. And typically it's part of a human in the loop process, which I think is fine, So King, for example, King of Candy Crush fame, I forgot how many levels there are in Candy Crush, but it's an insane number. And they still struggling to produce enough levels for Candy Crush players who want more levels. And yes, there are AI models helping with both level design and level testing and so on. But it's still like, these are the humans in the loop to sort of produce these levels, but with the help of all these models. They don't talk about it. Well, they talk about it publicly and they publish papers about it, but it's not, they don't talk about in the game, so it's nothing hiding, but I think it's fine. I'm like, full disclaimer, we even, at modl.ai, we even collaborated with King on an early version of level generation in Candy Crush. But then there are lots of other things. Said before, like every game studio worth their salt, do a bunch of, they collect a lot of data about how you play and do a lot of analysis. I've done a bunch of that in the past, but these days it's really hard because the studios are getting more and more careful with their data, essentially, and don't want anyone to use that. But there's a lot of that going on. A lot of game data science jobs and so on. Other interest, when you look at the stuff that's really front facing, there, of course, there's like, stuff that's happening during runtime. And a bunch of different studios and research outfits have been trying to do LLM-based non-player characters. And one of the most interesting examples is from InWorld and Ubisoft. InWorld is Maya startup and Ubisoft is Ubisoft, And I was playing last year a demo of something called Neo NPCs, where they basically had, you were in some kind of like vague cyberpunk setting and you were joining the resistance and planning a heist and so on. And you were playing the game by talking to people and giving orders to a drone and stuff like this. It was actually quite ready for shipping. Maybe it is now. This was more than a year ago. But it was very, it was, what do you call it? Like immersive. Now, one of the things that come up with this is that the reason it was good, because I've seen a bunch of really bad examples of trying to do NPCs with LLMs. I mean, there are those where you basically plop an LLM inside Skyrim and everything just breaks and becomes boring because that wasn't designed for that, and it's a really important thing is like most games aren't really designed for like dropping AI into it. You could take like a lot of interest. You could put a lot of like very clever behavior into the characters in Call of Duty or Halo or whatever, but that's not going to make the game any better because you will not notice it. It was just get weird and less predictable. No, but anyway, so these were good. They were few hallucinations, there were a few things happening. But one of the things was how much authoring you needed to do. Because like, if you write the regular non-player character, then they maybe have like 4 lines of dialogue in your dialogue tree. You don't need to write anymore. The rest can be implied. Now, if you're going to write a character that you can talk to about literally anything, how far away is the enemy base? How's your mom these days? What's the price of a liter of milk? Stuff like this. Does milk exist in this world? Does the character have a mother? Were they grown in a vat? Things like this. So you basically need to write everything. You need to have a whole story Bible and a whole kind of like story of this character's life to make this available. So this is one of these examples where like the role for authors is actually going to increase. You need more authoring, not less, which is one of the reasons we haven't seen much NPC-driven non-player characters coming out recently. Another reason, of course, is the computational expense. So basically, the economic model of games is such that it almost never makes sense to call a large LLM on a server, because you can afford it. What if someone pays $50, then plays this game for 200 hours straight, and they keep querying your server all the time? You're going to make a loss on this game. And most existing game hardware isn't strong enough to run like good LLMs on device.
I'm glad you brought up Skyrim, because that was the first thing I thought of about LLM in a game.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is super cool. And it doesn't really affect jobs at all or creativity, because the game's there. You're adding a new layer to it. And NPCs in Skyrim are already kind of ridiculous and hilarious and glitchy and weird. But to make it, like I think I read that they react to the player's choices throughout the game a little more than what was pre-scripted. So I kept meaning to try it out. I do have a gaming computer, but maybe I should prepare for a little more crashing.
So, yeah, no, like it's not making the game better. Maybe more interesting in some ways. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I can't stress this enough. Games are designed not to need AI. I mean, video games are designed around a lack of AI. And just putting AI solutions into existing designs are not going to help. You need to design from the ground up for the AI capabilities to really make use of it, which is why there's another reason we haven't seen much AI deployed at runtime in existing games, because we don't know how to design it for it. It's a technical problem, but it's at least as much as a design problem. That's super interesting. When there's a lot of interesting room for cool new studios to do this. And you basically have to rewrite your fiction and, of course, rewrite your game mechanics for this to make sense. Like the fact that you can order them around, and also how do you include in the fiction that they are kind of broken and not doing the right things.
I mean, that definitely makes a lot of sense for a game. I guess the reason that this Skyrim thing is hit or miss is there's already an established game, and then they added this layer of AI. So what you're saying is, if you were to integrate AI into a game, it should be part of the process.
Oh, definitely.
Let's have one team work on the base game, whatever. We have a framework.
Way before that, you need to design your mechanics of the game and the core loop of the game around what the AI model can do. And there are a couple of examples in history of this happening, interesting, being successful. The black and white series of games from the early 2000s actually had interesting and, for the time, sophisticated machine learning in this kind of companion character you had that would do your bidding, and you had to train it in game. It was basically react to both like demonstrations you give and like punishments or rewards that you gave it, which is really cool. And it's one of these things, like, I wish more people would pick up the gauntlet basically and sort of do more in this direction. I mean, we've done a couple of research prototypes. I mean, there's stuff coming out of academia in that sense, but I mean, we're research stuff. We're not a game studio. So
Black and White, that was, it kind of looked spy versus spy-ish. Is that what it was?
well, it's like a god game, like Populous or something like this, where you basically, you're some kind of deity and you're controlling the lives in some sense of these different villagers. And then you have this companion character, which is a large gorilla or something. And that gorilla can kind of observes what you're doing and tries to help you. And sometimes it goes hilariously wrong and you can punish it and stuff like this. Like, no, don't eat the villagers. You should help them by planting the seeds and stuff like this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You know what? I wasn't huge into PC-based games at that time.
It was somewhat successful, but it's a little bit niche. Interestingly, Demis Hassabis, who is the one of the co-founders of DeepMind, was part of the team of Black and White. It was kind of fascinating. So it's a direct lineage into the frontier of modern AI.
Yeah, it's Lionhead Studios, which is a great studio.
Yeah.
Peter Molyneux.
Yeah.
Okay, so this had some power behind the game. See if it's still playable, even though it's 24 years old. Is it, Chris?
Yeah. When people are like, when people say that, AI is the new thing, and I'm like, again, become like old man who yells at the cloud, then that's, like AI for games. AI for video games is also like.
Question break. What are your favorite games and genres?
See, I have two young kids. I rarely get a time to play games, except phone games. I see it as different. On phone, I play like little mobile things and roguelikes and stuff like this. I played Polytopia for a long time. I had to deinstall it to get rid of the addiction. It's kind of like procedural generated kind of strategy game. Is like Civilization Light. Like I tend to describe it like the Fisher Price version of Civilization. I've been playing Slay the Spire on Picks and Dungeons before that. And then on console, I like playing kind of like big sort of cinematic adventure stuff. Elden Ring was fantastic. I played Deathloop after that. And then Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It's an amazing game. Nintendo somehow, you feel like whatever happens to the world, Nintendo, and whatever the kind of new ideas come out in the outside world, you can trust Nintendo to just like be masters of it. It's just amazing the world building they do in the game construction. So it's a big, large cinematic story driven thing is open world often, but not exclusively. And I like multiplayer stuff. I rarely get a chance to play them, but Smash Bros, Mario Kart, whatever. Some point I realized that the main games I was playing and I was loving at the time was Elden Ring and Battle of Polytopia. And they're very indie focused. They do there's a lot of weird game design going on. And you got to play your colleagues and friends' games. Like, I don't know if you know Bennett Foddy, an Australian game creator. He got famous with Qua.
Oh yeah.
It's an amazing game where you're supposed to run 100 meters, but you control the leg of your on third part with 4 keys, QWOP. And it's just like bizarre. I'm looking forward to playing his new game, which is coming out soon, where you basically you're like a fat man walking on a mountain, which this sounds hilarious.
Yeah, it's like the same idea of you control the limbs separately, and you be a mountain. And I appreciate him because he just does innovative stuff.
Yeah,
he doesn't take himself seriously, which is somewhere I feel like so many of the best games come out of just stick around and just make something silly. And Quap was, I played that in high school.
Yeah.
And that was almost 20 years ago, and people are still talking about it at how
Counts for a moment. Counts for a moment. Yeah, imagine that coming out of a large language model. No. So basically, these kind of things, game design is in a sense like, I think it's my favorite art form. Perhaps competition with literature, but it's also my favorite cognitive science, because it's really exploration of like the kind of problems that human brains like engaging with. And if you also believe, as I do, that we like playing games, we think it's fun, largely because the games allow us to learn as we play them. They give us kind of a nice curriculum of things to learn. Then it becomes like the exploration of what humans are good at and can learn and like doing.
Yeah, that's something that I will say is what gave Vampire Survivors layers. It is incredibly simple. You go around and functionally don't play a game. You just use the joystick, but it excels in instant gratification of getting a new weapon and new power-ups and all of that, but very quickly it gets harder. So it has like a very nice curve of instant gratification, really well balanced with like micro learning. And I don't know what the scientific term of this would be, but a good curve of challenge. This boss came up, there's a higher quantity of enemies, I should say. And it's so addicting. Like when I first saw it, I'm like, this is a bad phone game. And quickly realized, no, this is what a good phone game could be. And then they brought out the Castlevania pack, and I'm a huge Castlevania fan.
But the reason why, it's just the interesting thing about creativity here. Why wasn't this done 30 years ago? Was it just like, no one had the idea? Did we need to basically have twin stick shooters first as like a genre to be inspired by or something? Or is it just like, sure, it could have been done 30 years ago, but then you would actually have to be a really good programmer to build a game like this. These days, game engines are so easy to use that you can just build it.
One of my recent podcasts was with a guy, Nick Walton, who created the game AI Dungeon. Have you heard of that?
Yes. And I played it, but it was a long time ago. And we had him even as a speaker at one of our AI in game summer schools. I didn't come here to basically to sort of hawk our AI in game summer schools, but we do run an AI in game summer school every year. It came out of the book, etc. But anyway, yeah, I played it quite some time ago, several years ago. And it's a very fascinating, very broken experiment. And I like it, but back then it was basically, you can start playing your own kind of role-playing game, but hallucinations run wild and there's no checking that you basically, that you just like don't do stuff that you can't do. I remember like being inside a dungeon cell and there's a dragon coming, and I pick up the machine gun and shoot the dragon. There's no machine gun in there, but like the language one just goes along with it. Yes, sure. You pick up the machine gun and fire into the dragon's mouth or something. So I guess these days they make progress with consistency and so on. I don't know how much though.
When I played it, it has been a little more structured.
Right.
And, it still will get wild and creative, but with proper progression. So maybe a situation like that could be unlock my magic powers and summon a machine gun instead of just, because that isn't a hallucination. That is a proper prompt.
Right.
Super ridiculous. It doesn't hallucinate. Oh yeah, there is a machine gun on the ground. Okay.
Yeah, but you have to make it. Which is the art of playing role-playing games. It's interesting though, the kind of like because this has been like the idea of like a sort of automated dungeon master has been there for a very long time. And, there's this whole field of like interactive digital storytelling, which like this vision has been there for a long time. I have this feeling with AI, like we spend so much time trying to replicate what a human does and trying to put a human out of the loop. And I don't know, the older I get, the more I feel like this is not the interesting thing to do. The interesting thing to do is like to see what kind of like bonkers new things can we do with AI that we couldn't do before and build on those. And basically leave the human interaction where it is. Like don't try to take humans out of things. Like try to come up with new things you can do with AI.
Now, I definitely agree with that. Like, I've played so many games over the years, probably hundreds of games. Behind me is also my collection with countless games at this point. And human creativity is amazing. And that is why I appreciate when games acknowledge their and art. I appreciate that AI is a catalyst for making people more creative. But at the same time, at least from a human creativity is great, but at the end of the day, we are still people with pens and computers. What can I do from a structural perspective? That is just so weird that it becomes its own medium, essentially. Why is AI like that's what I want to use AI for? Not even create a game, create this whole new entertainment thing.
Right. Yeah.
Just go full weird.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where we should go. That's the cool new stuff.
Like
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like all the other stuff. Like another thing that's happening, like, it's like the neural game engines are going to make a lot of things more possible. Like, technically we could imagine, for example, a world that, where game engines as we know them, they're still made for like used for developing games, but the whole kind of making it visual. It's like the game engine only move around objects, and then the whole kind of like rendering phase actually goes through an arc neural network that allows like you to change the style of what you're doing on the fly and so on, and allows some different kind of like editability. These are cool new developments. And like, something I really want to see is game engines incorporating fast forward models so you can actually do planning inside games, which would lead to a lot of more interesting things you can do with NPCs. Currently game engines are not made for that, but yeah.
So this makes me think of how some companies will hire people just to try new things. Like we have a full marketing team, but we need to get ahead. Your job is try the new program, software, technology. Your job is mess around and find out.
Yeah.
I think that's what I want to see AI for. We had this really cool idea. Just try some new stuff. See what happens.
Oh yeah. I mean, many companies do that, and then we have the well-known problem that large companies, they struggle to be innovative because they got processes, they got ways of doing things, and they know it, and then they hire people who to basically be these kind of mess around people. And then the problem is that these people are not trusted really by the rest of the company. I know people in R&D roles in a bunch of different game studios and game publishers and so on that are like, yeah, they do interesting stuff, but then there is a huge challenge to get the rest of the company to basically incorporate that, because that's not how they usually do stuff. Which is why I think the next wave of like AI-enabled cool little games will come from, small studios that have like a few people maybe, and that maybe start with AI capability and see how do we build a game around it.
So since we are definitely getting there, a lot of games are playing with AI.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the 5-year question of where do you see AI and gaming as a partnership in 5 years?
First of all, I do think we're going to see a lot of like interesting NPC work, built on a lot of writing, a lot of UI writing. There's some point someone is going to do an RPG that features characters you can actually talk to, and that's going to revolutionize how we think about RPGs. Not saying that the existing RPGs with like dialogue trees and so on are going to go away, but there's going to be a new way of doing things. This is going to be super content intensive. People are going to have to write so much content for this. But it's also going to be cool. You're going to have like, a sidekick with you, for example, that you actually can get to know. And sort of, this is a virtual character that you care about. This is going to be really interesting. And some games are going to love this because this is going to mean that there are games that you're not going to want to let go because you're going to care about the people much. Like I remember Mass Effect, the original Mass Effect trilogy. That was such great games, so well written, and also like decent action and so on. But I didn't want to let them go because I like the characters and I like the story. But at some point, I've exhausted all the dialogue trees. So then you're going to get to games where you can't really do that. Neural game engines is going to be a new interesting thing. They're not going to replace existing game engines, but we're going to see maybe a new genre of like short playable experiences that you can, that you're going to have maybe new forms of social media around where you can write like a paragraph worth of prompt that describes something and then you post it and other people will play around with it. And it's a playable thing, like WarioWare style, like 30-second playable thing. And then you will comment on it by posting your playthroughs or like remix it by changing it around and so on. So that's going to be a new category of, we can call it games, we can also not call it games, but kind of playable user/AI generated content. We're also in this sort of, traditional content generation. We're going to see like games that really that have really good level generation and like roguelikes, because roguelikes seems like a niche thing, but a lot of games have roguelike elements these days that we're going to be, this kind of content wall. Like Grand Theft Auto, for example, isn't actually a very large game. I mean, the playable area is pretty small, but at some point we're going to see games would actually have really large, partly generated or like fully generated areas, but they're generated in a way that they have new quests, that things are reachable, that there are a lot of guarantees you can make in the content that people haven't seen happen yet. And maybe we're going to see games that are like regenerate themselves in response to the user. This is another thing I've been talking about for a long time. And currently there's been curiously little progress, and given how many companies really care about modeling their users and basically adapting at least their advertising and the content selection to it. But content generation in based on what we call experience-driven procedural content generation is something that we haven't seen much of. That's definitely.
2 points on me. One is I 100% get the feeling I don't want to let these characters go. Yeah. Whether it's my custom character or the teammates. That's why I love JRPGs so much, because you get such a good cast of characters that I'm like, I'm not done with you. I wasn't going to do the side quest. Means I get to interact with you more. I'm in.
Yeah.
And when you talk about experiential driven games, I think it would be really cool to have games, the new game plus, that is based on the player's experience the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you do have an RPG, it's 20 hours long, and then you play it the second time and it's like, voila, here is the custom game crafted for you based on 20 hours of data.
Remixed and see what's new. Yeah, it's like a replayability thing. It's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because roguelikes have traditionally been very much about the replayability thing. And it's like often designed so that you play them many, many times and you have a meta game that progresses some of that. And that could be an interesting thing where like basically there's the core game, but then there's the stuff that adapts to you on top of that.
All right.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of scope for new design around AI capabilities there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to come down to scaling, customization, and replayability. I think games in general are definitely on the right track. If we can give more fine-tuned experiences, like I know a lot of sci-fi shows have done things like that, where it's like, oh, here's my version of it. That would be really cool to be like, oh, you like these characters, you do this kind of play style. It's work. All right. 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
Are you working on right now that you can share?
In academia, I can share everything. I'm like compulsively open about things. Now, so in my lab, we do a bunch of stuff that we that focus around open-ended learning, where we basically co-generating problems and solutions. You basically generate problems, and then you train algorithms to solve them, and use that to generate more complex problems. And you have like a whole library of different problems, and you try to get to some kind of general capability through that. And recently, we've been working a lot with PuzzleScript, for example, which is like a puzzle game prototyping language, and re-implementing this so it's really fast in JAX, and putting these quality diverse loops where we try to create new PuzzleScript games and so on. We've also done a similar thing for Ludax, which is a version of a board game description language called Ludi, where we published last year a new way of using quantity diversity loops to generate new board games, which is kind of fun. You get like new board games that no one has seen before, that are fine, playable, but they're like pretty obviously combinations of existing games. And we're seeing how far we can take this, essentially. And another aspect of this is a way of benchmarking actually large language models in their ability to play these games, in particular compared to more traditional methods such as tree search. And obviously, the language models absolutely suck. So whenever people like talking about, oh, an LLM can do everything, well, no, this language model is absolutely terrible at this simple little puzzle game that my sort of search algorithm can solve in like half a millisecond, which is, the right tool for the right task. AGI believers may implode at the thought, but then, so that's something we're working on in the lab. In modl.ai, we're working on a new version of our quality assurance. We haven't even talked about this, but basically ways of testing, particularly mobile games, by automatically playing them, and basically finding various bugs like rendering errors, text is wrong, stuff like this, or like the mechanics not working, which we hope will be useful for both studios and publishers and so on. It's hard because like general game playing, like taking a new game you haven't seen before and playing it, is very much not a solved problem. And anyone who says it is lying. I should know. I have tried this with every known method and many methods you've never heard of. So that's something we're working on there. And it's like, it kind of feels good about working on that, because like quality assurance and game testing isn't really a problem to part automate, because, no one really wants a career as a game tester, not after having worked as a game tester for like a day.
Yeah, that definitely was one of my career options at one point, until I heard it was playing the same level over and over and over
and over. And now we changed something. We changed the art in a different level. We must make sure that we didn't break this first level, not play it again, and stuff like this.
Yeah, it sounds so much better in theory that you're playing games for a living.
Yeah.
I'm in hindsight glad I didn't go. Lastly, how can people follow you and your work? It seems like you're up to quite a lot right now.
Right. So Google me, Julian Togelius, Togelius. I usually just use my last name as handle on a lot of websites like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. I'm everywhere, even though I didn't want to. But it's part of the job. I also have a blog, togelius.blogspot.org. I have a website, julian.togelius.com, which is like in academic fashion horribly out of date. But actually, I have a new version finished. I'm going to upload it any day now, where you can find everything about me. But basically, just Google me, you find lots of stuff. So it's just my last name. We're like 9 people in the world with my last name, and I'm the only one who does research.
So if you look up games, AI, Togelius,
if you actually really just type Togelius, that's it. You might find some of my mom's painting, and if you really dig really deep, you can find my uncle's papers about saliva from the 1980s, or maybe a clip of my little brother singing. But that's about it.
Okay, there's a tennis player out there, I think, or something like that with my same name.
Sorry.
Some athlete. So you look it up and it's like, you know what?
Okay. Could be worse.
Try and let my writing speak for itself, ideally, and not my name.
Exactly.
So with that, do you have any final comments?
Well, it's been a great discussion. Maybe we talked less about games than I would want to, but there we go. We talked a bunch about games. I feel like playing some games. I should go get my. I want to find a good reason to reward myself sometime soon, so I can go buy myself a Switch 2.
Ooh.
A new Donkey Kong. But yeah.
With that, Julian, thank you so much. I will be sure to link to everything you mentioned, and I will definitely follow a lot of the work you're up to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Your engagement directly contributes to the growth and success of our community. Please subscribe now and don't miss out on the next enlightening episode. This episode is sponsored by ODSC West, the premier AI Builders Conference celebrating its 10th year this October 28th to 30th in San Francisco and virtually. Learn more at odsc.com/California and use the code PODCAST for an exclusive 10% discount. Supporting our podcast by subscribing not only helps our small dedicated team at ODSC, but also unlocks exclusive benefits for you.